Okay. Great day, you magnetic beings. It's so great to be here with you again for another episode of Mystic Mavens. And we have our wonderful Kathy Basil tonight leading us with the feminine energy, the divine feminine. So I'm Joanna White, the midlife resuscitator, and I am here tonight to get this knowledge and be resuscitated in my divine feminine energy. So I can't wait for this conversation. Claudia?
Thank you, Joanna. Hello, everyone. I'm Claudia Rocafort, and I am a business coach and a communications consultant. And I am passionate about everything that is transformative, self-help, self-healing. So I'm also a spiritual facilitator. And thus, I've spent the last 35 years of my life working on myself and finding tools to support my clients with. So thrilled to share all of that knowledge with you. And I'd like to pass it on to our beautiful maven, Kathy Basil, who's going to be leading our conversation about the divine feminine tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. This is one of my favoriteest of topics. So I'm Kathy Basil. I'm a transformational life coach. I work primarily with women because I really, really believe that women, we've got a lot of collective wounding that has been, perpetrated upon us over many decades, maybe many generations, hundreds of years. And it kind of, part of this is a collective conversation. Part of it is almost like a wave that's happening from the two forces. So just like there's a yin and a yang, there is a masculine and feminine energy in the world. And we are in transition. We've been in a very masculine oriented way of being up until now. We're going to talk about some of the differences in this way. But we're coming into a space where the divine feminine gifts are what's needed in the world now. And it's always like a pendulum shift, almost like from the scientific to the spiritual kind of a thing. We're coming back into the flow of more of a feminine way of being. If you've been exhausted with the doing in your business, if you've had certain traits like falling into perfectionism or feeling like you needed to control a situation. A lot of these worldly lessons that we always talk about, as above, so below kind of a thing. As things are happening out there, they're lessons for us to take within and to embrace. What we're going to explore tonight is that divine feminine way of being, which actually allows us to kind of come into a softer, nurturing side of us that is going to help us personally, but also it's the gift that we can be in the world. A couple of the misnomers I'd like to address right up front before we start too much, because I wish we were called something else other than masculine and feminine, because it really doesn't, it's not a gender kind of thing. It's a set of attributes, and we all possess many of these attributes both ways, and we want to, their capacities. What we want to do by this opening this conversation is recognizing where we've been a little too stuck, maybe, and I'm going to speak in terms of, because we're all women, I'm going to talk a little bit from the female perspective, but, a lot of times the wounding in our childhood years, it is a male-female kind of a thing. And women may have had some wounding that happened where there was betrayal that happened and we felt like we couldn't depend on others. Sometimes it's that male thing. So we become very independent and we're strong and we're willful in these things. And we get to a point in our lives where it behooves us to kind of put a pause on things and soften and recognize, how do we come back into this feminine way? And I just love, so I chose pink for tonight because it's a feminine color. Joanna is modeling our camo over there. She's modeling being embodied in our masculine because we want these strong attributes. So what are the attributes of the feminine? Let's talk a little bit about that. Some of the things that we see out there in the world, especially, it's a lot more easy to see out there sometimes. But one of the top ways that I think of feminine is it's a collaborative energy where women, I like to think about the wise women, maybe they're circled around the fire back in the day, and they were the ones who would be taking care of the young ones, raising the families, coming together, preparing the meals. The men were out there hunting and gathering things, right? So women tend to be the ones that collaborate, they come together, they nurture one another, they nurture themselves, they take care of the kids. They're looking out for the good of others. Oftentimes the masculine can be associated with power over, and we're seeing a lot of that right now, that the patriarchy, there's lots of falling away of some of these old institutions that aren't quite in balance anymore. So some of the wars that are happening are kind of that struggle for the power over certain things. To unfold some of the conflict that we're seeing out there in the world or within, the nurturing collaborative approach is something that it is called for. So where can we find win-win in situations? A second way, attribute of the feminine, well, masculine is, and I lived in the masculine for a long time, so I can talk very definitively about some of these attributes. My previous world was being a meeting planner. And so that's a very logical, linear, you got all the information, and boy, I can take all the information, digest and make the timelines and the budgets and that kind of a thing. It's a very linear, logical thing based on the evidence that's right in front of you. The female or the feminine on the other side, rather than the logical, we can create answers, source wisdom from a sense of intuition. We can create from an inner knowing or being receptive to inspiration that guides the way from within. This is, as we look at what's happening, we can source the truth from within. As we're looking at some of the world events right now, what are happening, where do we find the truth? As the media is starting to, show greater lack of trust, right? We're being deceived by some of the places that we thought were authorities. We're questioning that authority. It's more and more important in these days for us to deepen that sense of intuition so we can come to our own sense of trust and knowing. Follow your heart, kind of a thing, is kind of the word of the divine feminine. And let me just do a couple more, and then let's bat some of these around, because this is such a rich conversation, and it's so timely, and it's so powerful as a personal pathway to transform. Another, I would say, is kind of that sense of being versus doing. In the masculine way, we tend to be very action oriented. The order of the day is kind of that do so you can have, so that you can be happy. You can do the things, work hard, and burn in the midnight oil, that kind of a thing. The feminine actually turns that upside down, where we are being. And, this is kind of in alignment with some of the laws of the universe that we've been talking about. How do we be that essence of what it is that we want to call in? Because the law of attraction would say like attracts like. So how do we be so that we can have and do, kind of a thing? So rather than the do, be, have, or do, have, be, we're being so we can have, so we can then do the things. And then let's pick another one. Oh, just receptivity. Receptivity is something I think women in particular, it's been hard. We've been strong. We've been successful. We've been taking care of all the kids. There comes a time where it just behooves us to take a breath and open to receive. We had that feminine, equal rights kind of push in the 80s, where women became overly strong and independent, kind of a thing. Back in the day, we wore the blazers that had the fake shoulders, right? To show that we could compete. We were equal in a man's world. It's like, no. Let's now soften and recognize that this soft, fluid, feminine energy is an equal yin to the yang kind of a thing, that we need both of these within ourselves, within our families, within our corporations, within our governments, and within countries in our world. So that, in a very, very quick nutshell, is some of the things that I think of. But there's so many other patterns that I know that I've worked through over the years, that being a workaholic, working hard to prove my value, kind of a thing, rather than knowing just by being that each of us has a gift that we are giving. The perfectionism of that incessant drive to make sure that we get it right, versus let's begin to evolve, and together, no one of us is the one to get it right. We get to evolve and create this new world we want to see and live in together. And I don't know, to me, it's just a beautiful framework that I use when I'm working with my clients to help them to let go of some of the collective storylines that I believe that we as women are struggling with, to find our own autonomy and keep place in the world. So I think we've struggled with not feeling not enough because we're trying to compete in a masculine world. It's been very masculine dominated. Though, where do we find our value, and recognizing that just by being, we bring that value. So anyways, what do you ladies have to chime in here?
Powerful. There's so much, Kathy. Thank you for all of that. And I think for me, being a single mom, raising a son, in the last 15 years, he's a 15-year-old now, all of these issues have come up so powerfully because being a single mom and being a single woman for so long, I always found myself kind of competing in a man's world. And I was a leadership coach and a communications consultant in corporate New York City. So intensely leading and working with primarily a male dominant world. And what did it look like for me to step into that as a woman and invite now other women to step into that powerful self? But can we start shifting? In my mission and passion right now is, can we lead from a place of consciousness? How do we create leaders who've integrated their masculine and feminine energies? And it's not about, postures or anything like that. It's about just that yin and yang quality. Can I be receptive while I'm also being active? Can I be the organizer and leader, but still get an opinion and feel that intuition from my team? Can I speak in a way that is authoritative and have my masculinity while I also receive and ask others their opinion first? Because if I give my opinion as a leader, most likely others will not give their opinion if they differ from mine. So there's so many beautiful ways that we can incorporate the feminine and masculine qualities. And raising a son, I also want to say, and to any man watching, right? We want to also look and consider the wounded male, because so much of the male role is taught to hide the feminine qualities and to not cry and to not feel and to not share some of those things. And, boys don't cry kind of thing. And there's this much wounded maleness. Women have had to deal with other different wounds. And I certainly felt them growing up in a society, particularly in Latin America, where there was a huge disparity between men and women. And it's something that I fight strongly for, those feminine values and feminine rights, because I felt so suppressed in the other ways. So I'm excited to really share both, really be able to come into a place of, can we start looking at the beautiful value of those feminine qualities, no matter where we are in our lives, and no matter whether we're men or women.
Exactly. This is bringing up so much for me as far as just life as a whole, as a child growing up, watching my mom. A lot of that is adapted with how she related to my husband, to my dad, and then how I related to my husband when I was married. And it was, she always took care of everything. And it was because my father was on drugs, she had to, not because she wanted to, but that was the role model that I had. So with that, I felt like the woman had to take care of everything growing up. And that's what ended up showing up the energy in my marriage for some time. And it wasn't because it was like I wouldn't even allow him to show up is what ended it up ended up happening. And when I look at it now, I was so in the masculine. I was the breadwinner of the house. And then I was in a masculine job. I worked for the railroad with nothing but men, and they didn't even like women in the workplace. So it was very hard at 21 years old, starting in this job that didn't even like women. And then much less, and then it was just so much. It was just so much because you take on these roles and you don't know the balance of it. And that's what it's really about, that masculine and feminine. We take on these roles, and not until I started diving deep after my divorce and therapy did they pointed out the things that I had to let go of, the thoughts that were creating in my head that was, as a nurturer, I wasn't nurturing myself.
Yeah.
It's like we're so taught to just nurture everything outside of us, like you said, and that's the masculine energy, and not really going in and nurturing within. And that's the key between masculine and feminine, really. It's that outside and then that inside.
Yeah.
Right.
And again, it's how we're looking for, how do we find our value? And that is such a great, way that we show up, is by nurturing others, but we've done it to the extreme. And so we've taken care of everyone else at the expense of ourselves. So how do we come back and take that breath and find that balance? Because truly, this is one of the key shifts that we have to do, is we have to nurture ourselves first. Like, we serve from that full cup and from our overflow. And trust me, there is plenty to do, all the things that we want to do, but we can't do it if we've exhausted ourselves. But I wanted to touch on another thing, because as you're talking about the working at the railroad, I can just imagine, because as a woman is showing up in a masculine world, and it's great, we can do it. We're strong, we're smart, we're capable. And tune into what has happened within your body. A lot of times we've suppressed that emotional side of ourselves, or the receiving side, or the nurturing side. And now our bodies, you see a lot of women that, and this is a lot of the work that I do, they're rigid. They've got these big shoulders because literally they've been carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders, and they haven't released it in a way that's natural to women. It's funny, one of the, I'll do these day Watsu retreats with a friend, and they get in the water and it's like a floating board. Or you'll see women that their bodies become masculine. It's kind of like their hips disappear, like that nurturing side of us. Like, we bring life into this world. Like, we want to have hip. We want to, Claudia, that Latin influence. We want to be able to have fluidity in our body and be open into our womb space, into our hips. This is where we birth life. This is where we birth creativity and new thought. Like, we need to come back into balance with our own body. So nurture ourselves, but nurture our beautiful bodies. Allow that emotional side of us to be expressed. It's not a sign of weakness. Like, that vulnerability, or the crying, or the compassion, the empathy that we have for others is actually the strength that a woman brings to the table, that is missing in this world right now, that seems a little cold and cruel.
Well, I don't want to say just women, though. I want to say men as well, because that emotion of not being able, or that I can't express my emotions, that's not manly, and it's like, that's the balance, being able to understand, as a male or female, we need to express our emotions in a healthy way. And that's just operating in that feminine energy, in your yin. That's what you're operating in, is in the yin. Because when we say feminine and masculine, so many people get confused because they've made male and female. But male and female is just an energy within, an understanding that is really, one is not there without the other.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And I love that, because as Kathy was mentioning about the body and embracing our feminine bodies, I love the fact that we can embrace that bodaciousness, right? Can we, not all bodies are curvaceous, not all bodies, have big hips and that Latin thing that some of us have, but, a little bigger on the bottom. But it's interesting to just begin to notice, okay, the way that I see it, it's kind of how much do we allow in our persona, in our beingness, to experience both sides? Kind of like the conversation of duality that we have in another episode from last year. Can we embrace both? Can we be the yin and yang, where we're actually allowing ourselves, no matter what our physical gender is, no matter what our mental and emotional gender is, can we allow both to coexist inside each one of us? And to me, that's part of the beauty of saying, if we can do that, can we bring that out into the world? Can we lead with compassion? Can we take charge while including our teams, including the world, including our country, including our voters? I mean, no matter where we're taking these stances, one of the greatest gifts that Edmund gave me when he brought me into his practice, I felt like the yin to his yang. But that doesn't mean that in that corporate world, I didn't take charge, or I didn't lead, or I didn't, that I had to always remain passive. Not at all. It's just I got to bring that feminine side also to a male dominant world and help men be able to honor that feminine side in themselves as well, and allow the women to be able to step into their strength without necessarily being shy or feeling that they needed to, that they weren't allowed to speak up for themselves. So we wanted to empower the feminine and bring compassion and empathy and intuition to the masculine. And all of a sudden, people started healing and magic starts to happen because we're embracing all of who we are.
Right.
Yeah.
Some of the best leaders are, I mean, they'll tell you the decisions that they make are made by intuition. So, these very strong, we have certain connotations, and it's like, no, the best leaders, as you were saying, they're not the ones who are up there they are able to make decisions, but they do it in a collaborative way where they allow everybody to feel as if they've had a voice. They may make the final call on that, but it's for everybody to have a role, so that collaborative feeling, the win-win-win attributes, so that you look at the satisfaction rates in our corporations, it's the productivity is in the pits, and a lot of that is just because the employees don't feel appreciated. Just something as simple as that. But looking at how we've worked our way, thinking that we had to work, that into that burnout mode because we're burning the midnight oil in order to prove our value. It's not like that. Now the leading places that counsel workplaces, they're recognizing that managing our energy and our ability to have efficient flow in our work is more valuable. It allows us to be productive. It allows us to be present and compassionate for others, and it allows us to open to receive creativity and innovation in ways that haven't been seen before. And in order to manage the energy, there's a time of push, and there's a time of receptivity or renewal. So we don't just like sit down and bust a groove for 8 hours. The best science is showing that our human capacity, we only have the capacity to focus like maybe 4 hours a day, and even in that we do so in cycles. So there's times of focus, there's times of relaxation and renewal, kind of rejuvenation time. So the feminine, this give and take, this flow in and out, this cyclical nature is pervasive in our own need for how we renew ourselves, but how we renew our teams, how we renew our societies, all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to say, and it's the same with the body as like in TCM. That's how we study everything is in yin and yang. So it's all in the yin and yang pairs in the body. Everything is yin and yang in the body. So when you say male and female, the male and feminine energy, it's everything is your chi, your energy in the body. So when we talk about these cycles that you're mentioning, every organ, everything in your body is in a cycle, in 2-hour pairs, actually, within the body. So every 2 hours is like a cycle for us almost, because there's something else that needs to be nurtured or needs to be nourished, or like there's something that has to happen every 2 hours. We're just not that aware or conscious of it. So we kind of just, like you said, it goes back to nurturing yourself. When you get to know thyself, you really get to understand that male and female energy, because like you're saying, that yin and yang, when is it time for me to go? That's why we have night to sleep, because we're made to nourish and rejuvenate ourselves during the night hours, as opposed to the day hours, which is more yang, and you're supposed to be more active. It's just, even in the times of day is more yin and yang, or more nourishing or active. So it's everything we do is in those cycles. We just aren't aware of them.
And I love those cycles because they give us perspective. If we can really see them and feel them, then it allows us to be able to say, I'm doing. Now I get to be. Now I get to sit back and it's okay. Now I get to receive. I remember my spiritual teacher once saying, Claudia, you're trying to put all these things into action, but how can you receive if you're holding on to what is and you're just so actively pursuing? You need to let go and you need to open to receive. You need to open to be receptive. And that's been a challenging aspect for me. That's still a lesson that I constantly get to remind myself, because I was sharing with the ladies before a relationship years ago in college. I remember we were taking a little trip, and I asked my boyfriend at the time, could he help me with the bags? And he said, of course, darling, I'll do that. And then 15 minutes later, he comes out and he asks me where are the bags, and I'd already put them in the car because, I was active and taking over and taking charge. And he turned around and he said, you gotta give me a minute and you gotta allow it, because otherwise I'm not fulfilling my role. I'm not receiving the ability to support you. And I found that to be so powerful. And I said, wow, and I'm not allowing myself the space to receive. Yeah. And to this day, somebody, this weekend, just at the retreat that we did in Mexico, somebody gave me something which was very beautiful. And it was hard for me to say, oh my gosh, what? You don't need to give me anything. There's no need. She just said, just receive it, right? So these are the moments that we get to look at these beautiful energies. And like Joanna was saying, our own body cycle needs that receptive time, that downtime to heal, to restore. And so it's about action and reaction, and all this impetus that we have that's fabulous and helps create and helps manifest needs to be balanced by the time, as Kathy was saying, of self-care. Without it, we can't function. So again, it's that kind of yin and yang. I love to think of it as the whole, as the circle, as the completeness, because then it gives me that visual of I allow it more. I allow the masculine and I allow the feminine.
I've been a deja vu moment.
Tell me.
Yeah, the concept about the open yourselves up to receive, because it's more important, I believe, than ever, because as I think we're spiritual beings having this human moment, and we, just like Joanna, you were saying, we kind of forgot that context, that we are here and we're thinking that we're the ones who have to do it all, this little human pea brain, versus the magnitude of the universe, where we're it's limitless possibilities are available to us. And so if we're unable to receive a gift, if we're not able to receive a compliment, if we're not able to receive some downtime for ourselves, we're not having a hand open for the universe to be able to give us something bigger. Are you open for miracles? Are you open for magic? So we have to continually find ways to get into that rhythm where yes, we're taking care of what needs to be taken care of in front of us, and yet then it's almost like breathing out and breathing in. Are you ready to breathe in the limitless gifts that are being presented to us all the time? With our brains, we need to do that same thing with meditation or whatever your form of cleansing the thinking. Thinking's really great. We want to be logical and get to the answers and work the question through. And what else is possible? What inspiration? I mean, look at Einstein and all the great innovators. Oftentimes they would nap. Like, can you get to the point where you would give yourself permission to nap so that they would clear their brain? Essentially, we're relaxing the brain to where it opens to a new wavelength, where you're a theta state, where you're able and open to receive information that's not happening, that we can't generate from our little pea brain, this human side of us. We need to open to the universal intelligence to guide us, to inform us. And it's wanting to all the time. Are we receptive and making space for that to drop in?
It's that receptive. That's the part.
Not easy. It's not easy. And I mean, a lot of this is generational, right? So, and we're evolving. So that's the nice part. But I see a generation of women, a couple generations where the women started working in the workforce. And so we all became strong and independent. And the men a lot of men fell away. So we've got this generation of women that are very strong and capable, and they're packing their own bags and opening the door. It's like, no, let's allow those men. That's what brings them the greatest joy, is making their woman happy. It's like, give them the extra moment. Thank them when they open the door. Looking for all the ways, for the next week, how many different ways can you allow yourself to receive, whether it's a compliment or the very smallest of things, and just recognize and nurture that receiving side of ourselves. Like Joanna said, it's not always easy. I've battled that a lot. That's been a challenge for my world.
It's definitely been a challenge for me.
It
still is, like Claudia said, is just being able to say thank you sometimes without returning a compliment. And that's another thing. Like, we get trained that somebody says, oh, you look nice. Oh, you do too. And we're not receiving. That's not being in the receiving mode. And that's something I have to learn, and that I still work on, because it's almost like a trigger. Somebody tells you look good, you got to return it right away. And
or diminished. Oh, I got it on sale.
Right. Or make it something less than, instead of just receiving, wow, I look good in it. Whether it was $5 or $500, I look good in it. And just being able to receive that.
Like what you're saying, for me, what I'm hearing is, let it sit. Really let it sink in. Because like you said, it's like ping pong. Like I just want to, pass the ball back, and it's not allowing me to really take it in. Can I be grateful for the compliment? What does that really make me feel? How do I feel about what this person shared? And to me, it brings up a little bit of this emotional intelligence and empathy that you were talking about before, Kathy. They've determined that emotional intelligence can actually be much more powerful than actual IQ in determining somebody's success in life. And this is one of those things that I love to teach and work on emotional intelligence, particularly when I was doing communications consulting in corporate, because these are not things that we're taught. And can we develop that emotional intelligence? Those soft skills become your power skills, because ultimately you make greater connections. You find better ways of conflict resolution. You find better ways to communicate with a team. And I remember years ago when I was studying psychology, and I transitioned from medicine to psychology before actually going into acting. So I feel like I've lived a few lifetimes in this one, a lot. But in that time of studying psychology, there was one actual test that I found fascinating. And what they were doing, this was back in the 70s when, political correctness was not necessarily a thing. And they would bring in parents and they would dress a baby, the same baby, they dress it in pink, and they would see how the parents would react with the baby. And then the parents would leave and they dress up another baby, whether it was male or female, it didn't matter. But then they dress it in blue. And what they realized is that instinctively, what we were conditioned to do is that to the girls, we would talk a lot more. We would ask them questions. Are you feeling? Are you feeling good? We'd do a lot of the baby talk and there'd be a lot of communication. Whereas with the little boy, right, they would bring out the planes and they would bring out the choo-choo trains, and it was about action. And so we have been conditioned on some level to behave in what we assume as roles or these personas that we've created about male and female. And this emotional intelligence and empathy is now, we're asking everyone to say, wait, I have both and I need both for my integrity, for my wholeness. And every man and every woman needs to come back to that wholeness. And to me, that's really powerful.
It is. I would always say, because I have boys and I don't have girls. So I would always say with the boys, it's all about games. Everything is a game. That's why we have older men that as long as you're playing a game, you're good. But with girls, we were bought the kitchen sets and the baby dolls, and you were taught from the time you were a child to hold a baby and to, when a boy is given baby dolls, they don't learn that nurturing energy, and we get taught that from the time we're able to talk or even play we don't play games, because that was a big thing with me. I don't have time for that. I don't have time to sit and, do the fun stuff. And that was the more active stuff, the more I was the one that was cooking and making sure everything, you know what I mean? And then sometimes I found myself building a resentment to that because I'm not the one that's having fun. I'm the one that's responsible and making sure everybody else is having fun, So balancing that energy is huge for yourself, because it goes back to now that energy, when you don't let go or express your male and female energy, it holds somewhere. And that's what shows up in our bodies as pain. So we start holding energy in different areas, and we don't even realize that it could be because you're not expressing a certain, even for men who like to cook or like to, in that aspect, they sometimes hide it because they don't want to feel like they're going to be judged for operating in that energy. And that a lot of people are getting sick because they're not flowing in that balance.
And I would like to kind of play off of what you've said, because of the way we've been raised, some of the societal programming that we've been about how girls show up and how boys show up, that I think it's really powerful right now for women to find our voice. Growing up, oftentimes, we kind of felt that the woman either, maybe as a kid, oh, you're too much, or kids are to be seen, not, heard, kind of a thing. And it's actually, women a lot of times have taken the role of being kind of the server, the nurturer, taking care of everybody else, and yet her opinion has been subjugated. And it's really time for us women to step into and own our voice, recognizing it's equally as powerful, but that whether it's in our family or in our society or in our corporations, both voices are equally sound and need to be heard so that we can come to a more balanced way of being and balanced decision making within the corporation, so that we have more sustainability. Because we're kind of, if you only have the masculine, you're kind of on a burnout role. And I mean, think about the world, you know, the way we're kind of powering over the world, how we're kind of, there's not, now we're starting to see more of a move towards sustainability. That's that feminine influence coming over. How do we stop tearing down the rainforests? You know, how do we do both? How do we get what we require, and how can we preserve this natural balance or the natural cycles that need to happen from Mother Earth? But it's really, I think it's time for us to find that voice, bring it to the world. And, you know, hey, the Dalai Lama said, the world will be saved by the Western woman. So find your voice. It's needed now more than ever with the conflicts that are happening around the world. What would a feminine influence look like in trying to resolve some of the conflicts that we're seeing that are so challenging and just downright horrible at this moment in time? You know, it's devastating.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important, like you said, our voices are power. And we need to step into our power. Whether that's saying no, thank you, or whether that's saying that doesn't work for me, or whether that's saying this is what I need, or whether that's saying I matter, and my opinion matters, and my voice matters. There are so many ways in which we as women need to step into that feminine power and into that allowing ourselves to realize that it is important that we bring that empathy, bring that intuition. There's so many. I have this beautiful chart that I was sharing with the ladies a little bit ago, and there's something that talks about the qualities of the wounded female and the wounded male. And I found it very interesting because the first thing that it says about the wounded female is being the victim. And the first thing that it says about the wounded male is it shows up as the perpetrator. Both are coming from a place of wounds, of not knowing and owning their power and their strength and their beauty. And we want that healing to start happening. Like Kathy was saying, there's so many things that are going on in the world. And if we had a little bit more of a live and let live, I mean, I can't believe that to this day, we are still fighting over land and possessions, and we're still trying to make other people believe what we think is the only way or the right way, right? If we found a little bit more of that compassion and empathy and thought, maybe there's more than one way. Maybe there are many ways. And all roads lead to Rome. All roads lead to that self-awareness and that connection with the divine, no matter what it looks like on the outside. And to me, those wounds need to be addressed. That wounded female and that wounded male, this awakening into your divine feminine is about healing that too, whether you're male or female.
And again, the healing comes from the emotions, because the emotions are being incited over and over again, which perpetrates the old story. And just like you're saying, it's like, well, I'm the victim. It's like, but when you get to the core of the desire of what everyone on the face of the planet wants, we all want to feel safe, have our space, raise our kids, have hope for a future that allows us to grow and educate our kids and play in freedom. And, you know, it's pretty core, you know, to have enough food, to have the things of survival, and to have that, you know, the freedom to express. So to me, when we can come together and from that core nurturing space. Open up the conversations with that empathy to see, how wounded is somebody else, so that we can recognize that same wounding within ourselves. And then how do we collaboratively come together and move forward, create a new future that works on behalf of all. That's
when we talk about the wounded, it takes me back to Don Ruiz, because in the 4 agreements, he says, treat everyone as if they're a parasite, or if they have that, like, if, we're all have trauma, or like that wound, or that just that, whatever that is, we all have some form of it. And it's a trauma or whatever, or a story that we told ourselves and attached to the outcome of something, instead of just saying, or not instead of, but growing through that. Like when you say the emotional part, that emotional intelligence is now knowing that this is just a story. I don't have to live this for the rest of my life, or, whatever that is. That's the emotional intelligence of that self-awareness and growing through that process, because otherwise you stay that victim, or you stay that, and then I love to say it's not happening to you, it's happening for you. So that way you move from the victim place of, oh, this is happening to me again, or this is, instead of, oh, okay, this is happening for me, and I can't wait to get on the other side of this. That's the emotional intelligence, and keeping that frequency, knowing that if you fall into the frequency of, I'm a victim, you're at a low frequency, and you'll keep attracting low frequency into your life, as opposed to developing your emotional intelligence to know this is happening for me, it's not happening to me, and staying positive and happy when it's happening for you, because that doesn't usually feel good. So the emotional intelligence is now keeping that frequency high when it's happening, and not becoming the victim when it's happening to you. That's what we all excel for. That's what we're growing towards, is to know that I have mastered me, that this will not affect me. This will not affect how I move through the rest of my day. Because I didn't like what you said to me, I'm not going to be angry for the rest of my day and hold that frequency now. But now I have to say, Joanna, why did that trigger you where you would hold that? So it's all a mastering yourself. That's what emotional intelligence really is. And then getting to the place of knowing in your emotional intelligence that this person that I'm talking to has their own parasite that they're dealing with, their own trauma, and allowing to treat and give them the space to just be. To be whatever or whoever they are in that moment, instead of getting offended by it, not taking it personal, like he would say. So it's really, that's the feminine as well, is just being able to, that emotional part, knowing and not holding, releasing.
And it's so powerful. I'd like to make a little clarification for anybody who has not read The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, that parasite that Joanna's talking about can be everything from a story to our just conditioning, just the way that we were raised. And that's what he's talking about. What she means is any beliefs that we have created that may be limiting our free expression. And that's really powerful, because again, connecting to that feminine intelligence and that emotional intelligence, as Joanna was saying, and as my beautiful Maven sister Kathy says, which is my favorite saying of hers, is enlightenment can happen at the speed of awareness. And so the minute that we can recognize how this is happening for us, because there are moments that there's no way you can experience that during the moment. There are traumatic experiences. There are things that you will not be able to in that moment be able to say, how's this happening for me?
Right.
Right. We've all, unfortunately, had a few of those. But can we let go? At what point do we choose to heal and say, that's not going to define me anymore? Whatever happened, or whatever that trauma was, or whatever that moment of feeling like a victim was, can I now choose to empower myself and love myself so much that that's not going to matter anymore? I choose to create my new reality.
And I love that, the call back to, for male or female, to love ourselves. I think we're all operating from a common woundedness of not knowing where we derive our value from, because our world orientation, this patriarchal society that we've had, has kind of been a collective programming around the doingness. And it's like, gosh, if I could gift one gift to each and every soul that's on the earth right now, is to know our individual worth just by being. Like, we are God's seed, we're sparks of the enlightened, just here to express. And there is no magnitude for what we have to do in order to be worthy of anything more. So if we could use that feminine side, that nurturing, that coming back and forgiving ourselves for all the ways in which we bought into, this is the way I get my worth, or this is the way I've perpetrated this conflict, these grievances we've been carrying along. Maybe there's parental, regardless of how good your upbringing was, you still had some kind of conflict in those early days that a lot of people never go back and clean up those kinds of things. And one of the best gifts you can give yourself is to look at all those grievances that have piled up along the way and bring that feminine nurturing side and allow some healing to happen there. Put it down and recognize that even those perpetrators early on, I've kind of shared my story. My dad, the crummy dad who cheated and started another family, like there was abandonment and trust issues. And that's where that strong little girl came out. And the best gift for me and to him was giving up the judgment. I don't know what was going on. So how could I, allow those thoughts to continue on within my heart? The hatred, the, separation, the discontent about all of that. The best thing you can do is to give that aside, because it becomes a toxin within our own bodies. So let that go, so that in this moment now, you can own that worth, shine your light, and make the difference that you came here to be. Just be in the world. Beautiful thing.
So powerful. So powerful.
Yeah, we could go on and on. It's such a juicy conversation. There's so many ways to unwind individual wounds or societal wounds, and the things that are going on right now in the world by using this as a framework to see where maybe an overly feminine or maybe overly masculine approach. How do we come into balance? Or what season are you in? That maybe it's a time for more push, or is it a time for more receptivity? As we're recording this, we're entering winter, so it is a time to kind of go within. Can we nurture more of that inner knowing, that intuitive side of ourselves? Allow that space and time to rejuvenate your vision, your passions, and be ready when spring inevitably comes around again.
I love that. And you were talking about sort of, the doing that, the patriarchal kind of world that we've lived over the last few centuries. Also, particularly lately, is about having. It's not just doing, but having, right? And it's interesting how that has, to me, distorted so much of our reality and our values and kind of what we're focusing on and what's important. And so that coming back to being, I remember a beautiful woman once in Sedona, the mom of a man that I dated who was just spectacular. And she said to me, stop doing, sit and look at the flower, and come back and look at the flower every day and just notice how the flower has shifted and changed and flourished from its spreading to its peak, to its zenith, to its death, to its releasing the petals. And it was just such a beautiful metaphor for where I was in my life, and where we all can kind of go every winter or every fall again and look, like Kathy was saying, can we use that time to meditate more, to journal, to maybe write, to maybe think about the plans we want to renew in spring. People wait sometimes to set those intentions for New Year's, but as we are collecting more in winter and the darkness is around us, can we take those times to maybe meditate more? One of the beautiful things about the divine feminine is unconditional love.
Mhm.
It can't just be out. It can't be that we're just giving it to everybody around us. It needs to start with giving it to ourselves. To me, that's the invitation every time. How can I love myself more today? And that was the greatest lesson Rayleigh, my spiritual teacher, gave me, because she said everything shifts when you are willing to love yourself more. And it has nothing to do with narcissism or anything like that. It has to do with what is the best choice? What will support me the most? What will heal me the most? How can I manifest in the best possible way each moment? By loving myself more each moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love this topic, Kathy. Thank you.
And speaking of topics, I believe you're leading the next one, Miss Claudia. What will you be speaking on in
Yes.
November?
So join us, everybody, November 2nd, Thursday, November 2nd. We're going to be talking about conscious communication. And this is my juicy, happy jam, because this is where I think it all begins. It's how we speak to ourselves, precisely looking at those patterns, right? Those behaviors, those beliefs, that conditioning that we've grown up with. And how do we get to shift it? How do we create an awareness within ourselves so that we can start changing the conversation with ourselves, and therefore the relationship with everything around us? So it's going to be good, guys. Come join us so that you can
They're
ask.
all good. I can't
Yeah,
wait.
they're all good, but it's juicy.
Juicy.
So it's a good one to learn actual practical things that we can apply, especially with the holidays coming up and with Thanksgiving coming up and things like that. When we start spending a lot of time with family, my favorite joke is the Dalai Lama says, whenever you think you're getting close to enlightenment, spend a week with your family. So they tend to be our master teachers, and you will gain some practical tools to realize how to shift the relationship just through the way you speak to yourself and others through conscious communication.
So come join us.
Yes.
Well, I think that's it for tonight, unless anybody has a nugget they want to share before we go.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Oh, good. Thank you. And love and light, everyone.
So thank you.
See you November 2nd.